Good evening, my friends. This is Paul, and today I thought it would be a good idea to share with you all some amazing stories that I've had of being miraculously healed during either Holy Communion or Eucharistic adoration. In fact, that's pretty much exclusively where I've been healed. I originally wasn't going to make this video. I was just going to save it for my end of year video. But then when I was at the gym and I told one of the customers the most recent healing that I had, she said, "You know what, Paul? You should probably tell more people about this kind of stuff." And so I said, alright. I didn't tell her I'd make a video about it because we're not allowed to self-promote at my job, but that was the first thing that came to my head when she said that, so here you go, if you happen to be watching this. So let's start out with the earliest miraculous healing that I can recall, and that was in July of 2018 when we were having Eucharistic adoration on my mission trip at Catholic Heart Work Camp, and I was miraculously healed in my back and shoulders, which had been absolutely horrible ever since I was a teenager. They still hurt every now and then, but nowhere near to the degree that they used to. I used to also have this horrible bulging muscle right here on this shoulder, which no longer exists. Here's perfectly fine as well. I can now do, well, I'm still not great at push-ups, but I can at least do between 5 and 10. I can bend over and lift up things much, much easier than I could. And it just feels like I've, gotten so much stronger ever since that particular evening. I made a video about it where I did a demonstration on the stage and spoke to an audience of about 300 people about the healing, so you can watch that if you want to. I think there was one that was earlier, but I guess maybe I didn't think about it as a miraculous healing at the time. But there was one time when I was just really sick when I went to Mass. I was so sick, in fact, that at one point I had to leave my seat and go to the restroom so that I could throw up. And I was shaking, and I was like, oh, I really hope that I'm going to be okay enough for Holy Communion, because I don't want to miss that. And so when it came time for me to receive the Eucharist, I was shaking and coughing so much that when the priest put the host on my tongue, I actually coughed it out. And so I said, "Hey, can I please have another one?" So the priest said, "All right." And as soon as I was able to chew on the second host, instantly healed. Instantly. And I was like, whoa, the power of Christ is really incredible. The one that I alluded to in my Embodying the Faith retreat video, as well as my eventual Best Memories video, is when I went on that retreat, I had been for the past several months, how do I explain this without being gross? I had been having a lot of digestive issues, and it was really hard to go to the bathroom, or not go to the bathroom every 15 minutes or so. Sometimes twice within the span of 5 minutes. It was so bad. And on that trip, as soon as, I kid you not, the exact second that the priest turned the monstrance to face the audience for adoration, I felt this incredibly warm sensation near the pelvic region, and I did not have to go to the bathroom for another 2.5 hours that night. At the time, I called it a temporary miraculous healing because I didn't remember feeling 100% better after the event. But at the same time, that sensation of absolute comfort of I am feeling wonderful, I am not feeling like I urgently have to go and can't wait for the events to end as I might have done at the rest of the retreat, it was utterly phenomenal. And I did actually get over most of those problems just a couple of weeks later, so it might have actually sped up the process. But perhaps the most recent miraculous healing that I want to talk about is one that happened, I marked my calendar so that I'd never forget it, on November 3rd, Sunday, November 3rd of this year. I was at my own parish, and again, it was after Holy Communion. It was maybe a couple of seconds after I got back to my seat. I was praying, and let me give you a bit of context first. During the priest's homily, he had talked about being open to whatever Jesus wanted to do to us during Holy Communion. So he said, hey, it's perfectly appropriate to just ask him when you're receiving, what do you want to do for me? And I specifically remember I was thinking about a friend of mine and how I wanted to make sure that she was okay. And so I just said, Lord, I hope that whatever you ask me to do, I'll still be able to make sure that I can be there for her to support her. And if I had to guess, I think that humility might have been why Jesus decided to heal me, because only a couple of seconds after I got back to my seat, I all of a sudden felt this huge relief, like the best kind of exhale ever, like when you've been holding your breath for a really long time, I guess. And the next thing I knew, I was cured of body dysmorphia. I've been alluding to it throughout the past couple of years on this channel that I had been wanting to strive for non-sexual, non-lustful body positivity. And while a lot of that was just, reading theology of the body and realizing that the church isn't against the body per se, it's about improper use of the body during premarital sex that the church has a problem with. But the church is actually quite notorious for having quite a lot of nude imagery throughout its history. The Sistine Chapel, for example, the Pope actually told the people who tried to censor them to remove the loincloth, saying, it's not sexual nudity, stop being a prude. Now, as far as the body dysmorphia, I will say that some people, when they hear body dysmorphia, they automatically associate it with transgenderism. And while there are some overlapping concerns, because both spectrums have a hard time dealing with the body that they're given, and they sometimes often want to take drastic measures to change the body. But the difference is that people with body dysmorphia don't feel a change of identity. They don't feel like they are a different person than what their body is. It's that they perceive a defect in their body and believe that there is something wrong with them, and they have an extreme amount of anxiety over something that they find to be problematic. And in my case, I would say mine was a bit more mild than what most body dysmorphics were, as a lot of them couldn't go a couple of minutes without having to look in the bathroom and being like, oh, is this acne spot gone? Is my hairline all right? And all that. My body dysmorphia came in the form of having a very hard time accepting everything that's involved with being a male. Not so much that I felt like I wanted to be a girl or that I identified with one. I just thought that certain male struggles were overwhelming and annoying, and in some cases I thought that it made me look, I don't particularly care if people find me attractive or not, but it made it hard for me to be able to look at myself. And it made me wonder if people were secretly thinking, oh, if he was a girl, he'd be so much more attractive, but because he's a guy, he's much uglier. And again, that sounds like I contradicted myself. I don't care if people find me attractive or not, but at the same time I was wondering that. I don't really know how to explain what I mean with that. But I will say that once I had this miraculous healing, the contradiction seemed to go away. I stopped caring about what I looked like. I stopped caring about guy problems. When I looked down at myself, I stopped being disgusted, and I kept saying okay, there you go. That's your body. Cool. And I stopped being jealous of women's bodies, and I stopped thinking that God made it easier for them and that he blessed them at the beginning of time and cursed men, because there's this theory that Adam actually ate the fruit first, and that's why they call it the fall of man, not the fall of humanity. Of course, that's a theory. It's not a doctrinal thing, but regardless, I had such a bad complex over my masculinity and kept thinking why do girls have it so much easier, even after I learned about all the stuff they went through. So that was one of the main reasons why I made the videos about body positivity and male struggles, was because I was wanting to enlighten the audience as to what guys go through and trying to encourage them to not be ashamed of their bodies, but it was also me trying to cope with body dysmorphia. But now that this is over, I have not had a single day where I've just completely regretted my body and completely regretted what God has done with it. I think to a certain extent everyone is going to have some amount of hesitation over what they look like, but for me, I currently don't really feel any kind of anxiety over something that I can't control. Like, sure, there might be some things where I'm like, yeah, okay, this is not that much fun, but it's not like the crippling, sleep deprivating anxiety that it used to have. I know this video was more so about getting over the dysmorphia than it was of anything else, but the main point I want to make is that that's the power of the real presence of the Eucharist. It has the power to literally transform you in the moment, as if Jesus could still place his hands on people like he did when he was alive on earth. And I understand that Jesus can heal anywhere, and people can absolutely be healed outside of adoration or Holy Communion. But I think the fact that a lot of my healings could have happened earlier in the day, and it was during communion or adoration that the healing took place, and I felt very specific sensations right after doing some kind of physical contact, to me is indicative of there is something going on about that host or that napkin in the case of my first miraculous healing at the mission trip of, okay, I kissed a napkin, why am I all of a sudden feeling this heating pad sensation? That's not natural. And some people have decided it's not really a Eucharist thing, it's more so just the power of Christ, to which I would respond then, why didn't Jesus heal me the rest of the night? Why was it specifically after I kissed the napkin, under the host, that he decided to heal me? Probably because he wanted me to be convinced in the true power of the Eucharist, and he wanted me to hopefully convince others that it's real. Unfortunately, I have a bit of a knack for not knowing how to convince people to convert. In all of the years that I've been alive, I cannot count a single time where I have convinced someone to be a Catholic. I convinced someone to be a Catholic faster one time. I was talking to someone he believed what the Catholic Church teaches, but he didn't go through RCIA as what it was called back then. Now it's called OCIA. Because he was afraid of what his family would think if he broke the news to them that he was Catholic. And so I said, look, the disciples were all martyred for their faith, and several people in the Old Testament and the early New Testament were brutally killed because of their beliefs. Surely a couple of scoffs from your family, it shouldn't deter you. And he said, Paul, you're right, I'm going to go through the conversion process faster. And he went into RCIA, now OCIA, the very next day after we had that conversation. And now he's Catholic. At least I assume he is. We haven't talked in years, but he became Catholic shortly after that. So my record of not being able to convert people still stands. So assuming that that's just not my gift, I hope at the very least that if some of you that are Catholic are doubting the real presence of the Eucharist, and maybe wondering, like, is that really a valid teaching of the Church? Yes, it is, if I'm any indication. And I have some of the less cool Eucharistic miraculous healings. I've heard of so many other cool stories, like when Jesus' hand would come off of the cross and pick up the chalice from the priest's hands, or when scientists would study a piece of the Eucharist and it started bleeding, and the scientists were atheists and they concluded that it was real blood. Look up those kinds of stories if you think mine aren't good enough. I hope someone can decide to be Catholic through my testimony, but even if not, I hope you can just be happy that Jesus has been so wonderful in my life, and that he did not reserve his healing just for those who were alive during the time he walked the earth. That he still performs modern miracles, he still looks after people, and that element of touch is still very much a thing. So with that, thank you very much for watching, my friends. I'm not really sure what to ask you to comment on this time around, but I hope that you will let me know how you feel about the Eucharist after all this. And until the next time, remember to keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye!